phonics, writing, spelling, grammar, literature. Sometimes we can find a curriculum that has all these pieces, but what if you want to do something different? What if you want to piece together your own curriculum in order to include all these parts of amazing language arts? They're all important, you gotta do all of them, but how do you put them together? Well, let's talk about that. Welcome, I'm Ashley from Joyful Noise Learning. I am a former English teacher and I currently homeschool my 3 kiddos. And I've been doing that for the last 8 years, I think now. Here on my channel, I like to talk about finding the joy in the chaos of life and in homeschool. And that's what we talk about here. Mostly affordable curriculum, biblically based resources, and Charlotte Mason inspired homeschool. So please consider subscribing and sticking around. Okay friends, I want to encourage you before we get into all the nitty-gritty with how to do this, I want you to take the long view. And that means that there's a lot of pieces of language arts curriculum and it can be overwhelming to try to fit all of it in. So just be encouraged, every part of language arts doesn't have to be included every single day or even every week. It will all get in because, you know, they're homeschooling over a long time and I know we're worried about gaps, but don't worry, our kids are smart and resilient and they're gonna fill in the gaps. For example, if you don't get to poetry this year, that's all right, just add it in next year or add it in next month. Another thing to consider is what are the parts of language arts that you really enjoy or that you think is important for your child to learn. And maybe there's some things that you don't think is important and they're not in the values of your family. Focus on the parts that you enjoy and want in your family first and then fit in the rest. So for example, maybe journaling and free writing is one of your passions and excitements. So make sure you do that first. And maybe for another example, maybe you don't like poetry and you don't think it's important. That's okay too. No need to force it down your children's throats. So just don't include it or just include a little bit here and there and don't worry about getting it every day or every week. Last encouragement is you need to look at your children's strengths and weaknesses, assess where they're at, and then you can be able to pick a curriculum that fits them with where they're at. By the way, I'm doing this video with a friend of mine, Megan from Pennies and Salt. You'll want to go check her out and watch her video after mine. She is a homeschooling mama to 6. She is happy to talk about finding out her kids' strengths and weaknesses, and she's going to share how she pieces together language arts curriculums to work for her kids. All right, guys, so your kiddos need a language arts block in their day. And then within this block, they can include each different pieces of language arts. You're gonna want this block to be about 45 minutes to an hour, but really it depends on your child's age and their level. But it shouldn't be much longer than an hour, really. If you're going longer than that, you're doing too much, is my thought. So we'll talk more about time and how much time it takes to do things later on in the video. Let's talk about the questions you need to ask when you're setting up a language arts system for your kiddos. Number 1. What needs to be done daily? Number 2, what can be done weekly? Number 3, what can be done with all of your kids all together? And number 4, what can be done by them individually on their own or individually with just you? So these answers are going to be different for each kid and depending on what level they are or how old they are. But if you do notice that the time increments increases as they get older. But here's about how much time it takes for our language arts block. These examples of time don't include them reading on their own, like for quiet time or just a book that they have picked for their individual reading time. This is their actual lesson time. So for example, my 6-year-old, he takes about 30 minutes, maybe less some days. It's about 20 minutes of working with me and about 10 minutes of him doing things on his own. For my 9-year-old, we have about 30 minutes of lessons with me, and then he has about 30 minutes of work on his own. For my 11-year-old, she has about 20 minutes of work with me and about an hour of work on her own after that. Okay, the daily loop. What needs to be done daily for language arts for your kids? Here is my examples. For my 6-year-old, phonics is definitely a daily thing. He's caught on really quickly and he's just growing really fast with this, but we still do it daily. We use All About Reading and we use The Good and the Beautiful level 1. And this really takes about 10 minutes. I don't spend a lot of time on this. We just do a quick lesson and we're done. The other thing my 6-year-old does daily, and this is the work he does on his own, that is his handwriting book, his Explode the Code, and he has a sight word book that he works in as well. And that's what he does daily. For my 3rd grader, spelling is done daily. This is new. It used to not be daily, but I noticed he needed to do it daily. It needed to be all done every day because he needed more work on it. He uses currently the Evan Moore books, and he works a couple pages each day. He also practices writing his words, and then we do the classic test on Friday. Let me hit on spelling really quickly. I don't push spelling before 3rd grade. For the kindergarten, 1st, 2nd graders, I really don't think it's a high importance for them at the time. I do mostly dictation with those ages of kids. We don't do full-on spelling workbooks or worksheets and lessons, but I do like to start at about 3rd grade for my kids. And that's mainly because that's when they're old enough and can read usually, and they can do things more independently, and I don't have to be involved with doing the lessons. I feel like any kid younger than 3rd grade, I have to sit and do spelling with them and talk about it and tell them and show them the cards. And that was something I decided to take out of my routine for me, what I do as a mom. So that's why I do it for my 3rd and my 5th grader. They're able to do spelling all on their own. My 6-year-old gets dictation words like once a week, and that takes us like 5 minutes. So that's what I do for spelling. All right, moving on with what else do we do daily? My 5th grader daily has grammar and spelling daily. So she's doing IEW Fix-It Grammar. I'm loving this. I really wish I would have started this sooner. It's basically what I was trying to do in the past with Brave Writer, if you watched older videos, but this one, it's a little more structured and it's very independent. Once a week, I sit down with her for 10 minutes and I read with her and show her the pieces of grammar that she's learning, and then the rest of the week she does it all on her own. So she does that daily. We also do spelling with her daily, and we have just started the Rod and Staff structure and sound books, and she's doing level 5 right now. And that book, I noticed, only takes her about 10 minutes a day. It's really quick. It's not a lot. And she does that all on her own. Unless she has questions and needs help, then I help her. All right, the other thing that needs to be done daily, we do individual reading every day, and that's where the kids read to themselves on their own. For my oldest kids, they have readers that they're reading that's assigned to them for history and science, but they also each have a book that they've chosen to read that is on their reading level. And that should be done for 20 to 30 minutes a day. Some people do an hour. You could probably up that to an hour for some kids. For our family, we stick around 20 to 30 minutes. For some examples on where to find these readers, we use the suggestions from A Gentle Feast because that's the curriculum that we're using. But I know that Sunlight and My Father's World have really good book suggestions for this for each age group. Read Aloud Revival and Heritage Mom Blog has some awesome great book lists that you could use as well, or just use your own. Like, what do you want your kids to read? What are books you liked when you were their age? Just pick readers and let them read. So this doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be books that have come with a curriculum. They just need to be good books that are fun and engaging and teach your kids about other cultures and other opportunities outside of your 4 walls. Don't feel put in a box with what you let your kids read during their individual reading time. And for me, I give my kids suggestions, but I do give them opportunities to pick for themselves what they read during this time. Anyway, just find books that are on your kids' level for this. Lastly, this doesn't necessarily have to be done daily, but having your younger kids read to you and getting that fluency practice. We use All About Reading and Good and the Beautiful for phonics and pre-reading work or reading lessons, and that's included in there. There are lots of reading out loud to you practice in the Good and the Beautiful and in All About Reading. They come with readers to read that are right along with what the kids are learning. So that I require more when my kids are in that stage. For my 3rd and my 5th grader, I don't necessarily have them read to me as often. I do try to give them opportunities to read during our morning time. It really shouldn't take too long, 5-10 minutes of them reading aloud to you with whatever readers they have that are at their level or below their reading level. Lastly, the other thing that we try to do daily, this is most days, I don't always get this in every day. Again, we're thinking the long view here, right? If we read aloud to them every day, that's great. You know, even if it's just 10 minutes, that's great. Sarah Mackenzie talks a lot about this in the Read Aloud Family book, but again, we're taking the long view here. So if you read aloud to your kids most days a week, you're doing okay. If it's not every day, that's okay. So that being said, we try to include read aloud as often as we can. It's usually a picture book or a chapter book that goes along with our history or our science units. And we have another chapter book that's just a fun read aloud that our family is all enjoying and we do all together. Your read aloud should be above your child's reading level because this is a book that they can't read for themselves. It's gonna have higher vocabulary. It's gonna have grammar structure. You know, it's gonna have the higher grammar and vocabulary that you are able to read that they can't do on their own very well just yet. And so by that you reading it to them, they're gonna hear it and then that's gonna help them increase their fluency as they get older. When do I do read aloud? I do it either I do it either during our morning time, first thing in the morning, or at lunchtime or right after lunchtime. Or we do it at bedtime right before the kids go to bed. And we also have audiobooks that we listen to when we're in the car just driving around, just whenever. There's no like structure to that. It's just like, hey, we're going to co-op today. Let's listen to the Little House book. We're going to the grocery store. Let's listen to whatever we're listening to. So that is how we do read aloud. If you are interested in Charlotte Mason inspired language arts, I did a video on that before and you can check that out here and or put a link in the iCard, whichever side that's on, whatever. Check out my video there about language arts based on Charlotte Mason. Okay, next thing is what needs to be done weekly and doesn't have to be done daily. Here's my examples here. My third grader still does phonics lessons, but they're not a daily thing anymore. We do this about once a week, maybe twice a week, and I use All About Reading Level 3. And this takes about 10 to 15 minutes with me. Also for my third grader, we don't do grammar daily. We do it about once a week too. I don't have an official grammar curriculum for him. Sometimes he uses Gentle Grammar workbook, and I do grammar memory work with my kids all together during our morning time. When we talk about the parts of speech. My third grader also does copy work once a week, and he gets that from his Gentle Feast language arts book and a quick grammar lesson that's in his Gentle Feast language arts book. But I do plan to probably put him on Fix It Grammar Level 1 by IEW next year. Poetry. Poetry doesn't have to be done daily. Once a week or a couple times a week is great. So we do memorize poetry, and that includes, you know, memorizing poetry or reading poetry. Again, if you're not a huge poetry family, it's okay not to include it. I prefer memorizing poetry, but I'm not a huge just gonna pick up a book and read poetry for fun type gal. So we don't do that often. Sometimes I will do that. It's not very regular. It's just when like, hey, let's read poetry today. And I prefer like Shel Silverstein. I prefer the funny poetry just for fun. So, but I do have them memorize poetry. We do this all together during our morning time.
Never do it fast.
When I was 1, I'd just be good. When I was 2, I was nowhere near. When I was 3, hardly me. When I was 4, I was not much more. When I was 5, I was just alive. And now I'm 6, clever as clever. I don't think I'll be 6 now forever and ever.
And the poems we have them memorizing, we're using with a Gentle Feast morning time curriculum that's included, and they're included in their morning time curriculum. But there are other lists out there. There's so many great poems that your kids can memorize. You can just get a book and then start from start to finish and memorize them. Or there's lists out there. Pam Barnhill has a great morning time list. Treehouse School has some great morning time resources with poetry. And I don't know, maybe there's poems that you enjoy and love. Do those poems. First Language Lessons has awesome poetry there for different levels. So you can include that. And again, we do that all together. And it really takes like 5 minutes. We just read like a stanza, I'll read it to them, they'll repeat it, and we do one stanza every week until the poem is memorized. And that's how we do it. But again, you don't really need a curriculum for poetry. You just need a poetry list and print off the poem and work on memorizing it. That's it. Okay, grammar again. I'm back to grammar again for my 6-year-old. I do not do grammar daily with my 6-year-old. I am waiting until he's a bit older. Grammar is another subject that I don't think needs to be pushed too young. You can do, memorizing things here, like what is a noun? What is a verb? A verb is a
word that does an action, shows a state of being, links two words together, or helps another verb.
We do the little memorizing things like that, but I don't do a grammar curriculum with him at all. For my suggestion, starting grammar about 3rd or 4th grade is good, really good, because then they're ready there and they grasp it. Anything earlier than that, just do some memory work. Yeah, no need to push it too early. Writing lessons are not done daily in our house. We're working to that, but I have a few people in my house who don't love writing. So we're working on our writing muscles now, both literally and just the practice of actual writing. So writing grade by grade, my 6-year-old, he just does copy work from his Gentle Grammar book. And he does this explode the code thing. He does not do a lot of writing. I mainly do oral narrations with him right now. And that's him just asking him questions about a story after we read it, or after a book when we're in the middle of reading. I ask him what he remembers and he tells me. And he is actually a really great storyteller. He's really great at narrations. And I think once his writing muscles are ready, I think he's gonna be really good at writing. He'll actually just sit and write on his own for fun. He'll ask his sister, he'll dictate to his sister, and he'll tell her a story and she'll write it down. So that's been really cool. I don't necessarily include that on a daily rotation. Okay, moving right along. We're still talking about writing. For my 5th grader, finding a good writing routine for her has been very difficult. I've tried a lot of things. Some things have worked and some things have not. But this is what we're currently doing and I really like it and it's finally working. She's 11 years old now. And this is what we do. I've started using IEW, Fables, Myths, and Fairy Tales. It's part of the Writing with Structure and Style series. And it's super simple. We do it about 3 days a week. It's not every day. 1 day a week, she sits with me and I do the lesson with her. And we go over what we need to do. And then the other 2 days, she does it on her own. I'm not gonna tell you all about IEW right now, but it only takes us about 3 days a week. And she does this mostly on her own. It takes her about 20 minutes or so, depending on the day. Some days are longer, some days are shorter, but it's included in her daily language arts block. So I know some people just get the videos and mom doesn't even have to teach at all. You just have your kids watch the videos. You could probably watch along with them. I'm sure Megan will talk more about IEW in her video as well, but this is what we're using now too. My 5th-year-old, my 5th grader also does creative writing. This is not something I assigned to her. This has something that I believe at this stage anyway. As she gets older, we might change, but at this stage, it is not assigned. It's not part of her school. I don't use a curriculum. I let her just write. When she is inspired to write something, I have her go for it. She has written comic books. She's written short stories. She's working on a different short story right now. I don't necessarily correct this either because I want it to be something that's more free writing and something that she enjoys. And I don't want to kill the love of writing for her just yet. And I feel like that grammar and the correct spelling and stuff like that will be coming throughout these middle school years and into the high school years. Lastly, the last part we have for language arts is our narration journals. This takes about 10 minutes. Well, it depends on the kid really, but it takes about 10 minutes for our kids to do this weekly narration journal. And it's once a week. My 5th grader does hers on Wednesdays and my 3rd grader does his on Fridays. And my 3rd grader types it, my 5th grader writes and or draws. And this is something where I have them pick one book that they read or listened to during the week. It could be their history, it could be their science, it could be their free fun read, it can be something we're reading together as a family. I don't care. They just pick one of those and then they write a summary of what they remember from what we read. They both have been doing narration orally for several years now. And just this last year, I decided to add in the written narrations. And another little tip that I do with my 3rd grader, I have him tell me what he wants to write. I write it on a dry erase board and then he types it up. And that's how we do narrations for him. And lastly, again, if any of your kids are struggling with writing, do dictation. I think it's wonderful. So many of our kids are still focusing on the writing part, like how to write the letters, and their brains are not necessarily connecting with just writing down what they're thinking. Usually by 5th grade, they should be able to do that, but my 3rd grader is still really struggling with that. So that is why I do a lot of dictation with him, and I'm having him type his narrations too, so he's not just writing them. So just the act of going from the brain into the hand has been really difficult for him. So I'm trying not to push him too quickly with that. And I think the dictation has helped a lot. He tells me what he wants to say, I write it down, and then he copies it. And that has been wonderful. So I highly suggest that. That's a free tip about language arts for anybody who has a struggling writer, for sure. Oh boy, that was a lot. That was a lot. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that helped. If you have any further questions, let me know in the comments. Let's talk about this. Let's help each other out with this, okay? Make sure you watch Megan's video and how she pieces together her family's language arts curriculum. She loves helping other mamas help find the curriculum that's right for their family. If you'd like a little more help, I do have an ebook called Ready, Set, Homeschool, where I talk about the basics of getting started homeschooling, and that includes picking language arts curriculums. A lot of the stuff that I just laid out here is in that ebook, but there's a bit more information in there. If you're interested, I'll put a link in the description below so you can check out that little ebook I made. Oh, if you'd like more, another video is how to make the curriculum work for you. I did that video and I thought it might help you out after all that we've talked about here. So thanks again for being here. You rock at homeschooling. Go find his joy among the noise. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you next time.